era of instant food and grocery delivery is in rapid decline tonight, with another popular startup shutting down.
There's been a few well-known, well-branded food delivery businesses that have run into trouble. Or not just food delivery business, but it also can be goods delivery business. A good example of that is Milkrun. And what has been happening is they haven't been going into liquidation as such, or they're not bankrupt as such, but they're going into administration. In other words, there's probably creditors that they can't pay relative to the amount of income that's coming into the business. And I just want to talk about that for a second. It doesn't necessarily mean that the business model is broken. It doesn't mean that the thesis that these businesses were originally conceived was not a correct thesis. They did well during the COVID period. There was a demand to be supplied by businesses like this who interact with restaurants or convenience stores, etc., to deliver things to people's homes. Makes sense. They responded to the demand, built the IT in the middle of it, created the marketplace, and then connected with the suppliers. Good thesis, makes sense. But those businesses, like all startup businesses, take a long time to make cash flow positive and or profits. It takes a long time. During that period and during the build up, in other words, we go from 1,000 units this week to next month, 2,000 units to the month after, 5,000 units. So in other words, the thesis is being well picked up. There is demand for this supply of goods and services. By definition, they are burning cash. So during the growth period of any new business, any startup, particularly if it's growing aggressively, particularly if they are marketing it aggressively, they need what you call patient capital. And the general position is you go back to the market every year or two. So you start off with a family round, you might have an A series, a B series, you might raise 200 grand from your family and friends, etc. You might have some savings yourself. They might get you through the first 6 to 9 months. Then you go into an A series, you might go and raise another $1 million bucks, and you might do a B series. And that's a typical process. The issue that these companies have had, because in particular I've invested in one of them, is that they couldn't raise any money now. The difference between now, 2023, and 2022 and 1 and 20 is the availability of capital. When interest rates go up radically, quickly, liquidity withdraws from the startup industry. And as a result of liquidity withdrawing from the startup industry, it's another way of saying, I've got 100 grand, I wouldn't mind investing in your business in this round you're trying to raise money, but I would rather put that 100 grand into the bank because I can earn 5%, no risk, 5% per annum, and I'm just going to sit back and wait and see what happens. Right now, the landscape for funding of these types of startups is exhausted. You're not going to raise it from overseas either. I don't think you can go over to San Francisco and raise it in the Valley because it's too small. You might raise it here, but you've got to come up with some reason why this business won't need more capital in another year's time, because the person who invests capital today is going to say, well, if you go back into a Series 2, a Series 3, Series 4, every time am I going to get diluted, which is not what an investor wants to hear. So if you're one of these companies you're growing so fast, there's a mismatch between cash flow in and cash flow out, then the only thing you can do is adjust your cash flow out. There's a lot of fintechs or neobanks out there that we read about all the time who won awards for their technology, but are not getting the flow of mortgages, for example, through to their business that they expected to get. The best thing to do is stop, announce that we won't be lending anymore. Pare down your business costs down to the bare minimum and just wait for this market to reopen. It sounds radical, but it's better than putting yourself in a position where you're building up creditors, hoping that one day you'll get the capital in you need, and then all of a sudden a creditor applies for administrator to be appointed, or you, the shareholders, get so nervous about trading insolvently, you apply for administrator to be appointed to protect your position. So for me, you've got to be looking for these things. In startup land, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's tech or health or finance or deliveries, logistics, you always got to be pretty much a predictive scientist. You've got to be looking ahead 12 months. What's coming my way? What are the things I need? I need capital, I need people, I need marketing, I need branding, I need stock. You always got to be predicting where this is going. Make your adjustments before it's too late. So predictive science means looking a year ahead, saying, wow, there's a problem coming up potentially a year's time. I'm better off taking the conservative approach, dropping my expense line, because if something goes wrong on the revenue line, I'll be okay. The business will be okay. Now, if your prediction is wrong, There's no downside. You just start to pick up again. You just start winding your business up again. But if your prediction is right, then you're not in the shit. Now, I don't want this to be misinterpreted. It doesn't mean that there is not capital out there available for startups, particularly for tech startups. It could be a new app around health. It could be a new Fitbit type thing. I don't know. There are lots of things that are still attractive because at the end of the day, these VCs, these venture capitalists have got to invest the money. They can't just sit on the money and do nothing. They've got to invest the dollars because they get paid a fee. The fund managers get paid a fee based on what they've invested, not what they've raised, what they've invested from what they've raised. So to get their fee, they're going to invest it. So you've got to find out, is the idea that I have, the thesis that I have, something that is currently what I call investable? Turn up to pitch nights and all those sorts of things where around town and find out who's pitching, who the investors are interested in. Is this something that I can do? Is this my territory? And is this a time when I should be venturing into those environments? Money is an interesting thing. Liquidity or money is an interesting thing. It always exists. It doesn't disappear. It just moves around the world geographically and it looks for asset classes to attach to. Your game is to work out which asset classes it's attaching itself to at the moment and in which geographies. Is this an asset class that I can play in? So I don't blame the thesis. I don't think there's an error in the thesis of these ideas which were launched during the COVID period. I think the issue was a misjudgment in relation to the availability of capital when there was always going to be a change in the dynamics of the money market. In other words, that big piece of inventory that all these businesses need is capital, patient capital. And if you can't raise the money, then you're going to go into administration because you're going to miss paying some creditors. And that's why these companies are in administration.